SOFHAB. Hey everyone, Rascal here.
And Mama, welcome to our channel, Paws On Animation.
Today we're covering the long-awaited sequel to Ernest and Celestine, A Trip to Gibbertia.
Ernest and Celestine 2. So this is one sequel that no one saw coming, but clearly someone saw that this movie had a very loyal and dedicated fan base for years. So, in January of 2022, they announced a sequel to the original favorite and released it in late 2023. Now, there are barely any reviews on it, and that scared us.
But before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, click notifications on future podcasts and on the Paws videos.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining, subscribing, sharing our videos, and so much more. We really appreciate all you do. So, we looked forward to seeing this because after seeing the first movie, which was outstanding, we're like, this has got to be great. Oh, we can't wait to see it. Didn't know the name of it, looked it up. We were so excited because, wow, the first movie was just something to behold. And the first movie actually came out in 2012, quite a while ago.
Wow. So who would have thought that 10 years later, or more now, that they would have a sequel to this?
Right. The first movie was written by Daniel Pinnock, and it had a budget of 8.9 looks like francs, and earned 8.1 million at the box office. And then we get the second movie, which we mentioned was released in 2023. This one was written by Guillaume Martellon and Sebastien Orsi.
Okay.
So totally different writers.
Yes.
And based on the book Ernest and Celestine by Gabriel Vincent.
Right.
This movie released in December and has a running time of 80 minutes. And I think it did so badly that they're not even telling you the box office.
Yeah. And it ended up coming onto Amazon Prime as an exclusive at one point.
And it was released by G Kids in the US.
Right. And as you said, we were so excited to see this. We were so excited that we ended up rewatching the first film again to get ready for the new one. And we already have covered the original movie and said it was really a wholesome, sweet movie. It was one of those underrated gems, and it's one of those cozy type films to watch either by yourself or with family.
Studio Canal released it.
Right. And then we get to the sequel, and we only saw really 2 reviewers that actually covered the film. First, we didn't know if it was because people didn't know about it or because they didn't care for it. Well, we start within the first 10 minutes of the movie, and the vibe is completely different from the first film.
Now, what's odd is, well, it's not odd. Rotten Tomatoes is being paid off because we're going to listen to them anymore. They gave it 100%. How in the hairy heck they gave this movie 100%, I don't know. It's like they didn't even watch the movie. They just said, here, give it this rating and we'll do it.
Yeah.
Metacritic gave it a score of 70 out of 100 based on 6 critics indicating it got generally favorable reviews. But if anyone has watched this movie, you definitely will wonder how. As Rascal said, the feel isn't there. The tone isn't there. The innocence isn't there. The lovability of the characters isn't there. So much that was in the first film, including a fantastic voice cast, and we'll tell you about
that.
The one here because they replaced the ones from movie 1. We got a few favorites in it though. This just doesn't even belong in the same group as the first movie.
Yeah.
It's not Ernest and Celestine.
No.
It just isn't.
Right.
It's something different.
Right. So the story here is that Celestine accidentally breaks Ernest's violin and the little instruments that he would play in the town. And he actually goes off on her, which was a little surprising to see after the end of the first movie, and he becomes really depressed. They were just going to play some music so they can get money to get food. They were out again. And he said the only way to fix it was to go back to his hometown of Gibbertia, which is actually a clever little name when you think about it. And he didn't want to go back there no matter what. He was really determined never to go back there, and you don't find out why till later. So Celestine decides she's going to go there herself and get it fixed for him as a surprise. And of course, he finds out she's gone. He goes and finds her. Comes an adventure when they go there. It's like, well, if this means as much to you just to help me, I'll go with you because it's all in all fair country. And from that point on, the movie attempts to have a story. It's a silly story, and it's just like the first one, but it's not an endearing story. And I think the problem is that you're not feeling a connection with Ernest and Celestine like you did the first movie. You understood they were supposed to be enemies, they become friends, or they were like a forbidden friendship because it was mice versus bears. That does not play into here whatsoever. In fact, you do not even see the town that they were in this movie. They completely just like ignore it, and they just have an all bear place instead.
I think they should have kept the first writer, Daniel Panay. He did an excellent job with the story, and I think that's the main problem here. The two writers, they clearly did like we talked about for King of the Hill, where they started getting new writers, and they ended up changing the backstory for Peggy and a couple other people, because the people who were there before did not watch the episodes nor consult to see the backstories or anything about the characters, and they made up their own version.
Right.
And I think the same thing happened here. They didn't watch the first movie. There's no way they could have watched it.
Right, they just know how it ends.
They probably didn't read the book. They probably were tasked with just writing the script, and they did it. And there were 3 producers, 2 directors, and I just don't think they got the gist of what made the first movie special.
Right.
And it shows in here all throughout. It's just really disappointing. It personally, for us, was difficult to finish.
Unfortunately,
I
and it's not even
it off
long.
multiple times.
And the thing is, it's almost the same runtime as the first movie, so it's not like it's a 2-hour film that stretches. It's an 80-minute film that stretches something that should be even shorter. And another big problem is that when they get to Gibbertia, you notice that there's no music. There's really barely any sound effects. And at one point, they do play this into the story. Apparently, you find out that this town that Ernest grew up in hates music. They banned it. No music whatsoever. Nothing makes a noise. They play one note of anything ever. There is no music. It's been banned. Yeah, it's silly. It's like Footloose. You're like, okay, we'll see how this goes.
Right.
But they take it so seriously. And not in a funny, like, okay, it's such a silly rule, but they take it to the highest degree. They go to a realistic length of to not have the music. They go for beating them, using the hose, tracking them down, hunting them down. They're using realistic tactics, not silly little tactics, which kind of end up hurting the movie's tone to the point where anytime someone plays some music, it was like gasp and ahs and freaking out because no one wanted to get hurt for playing a song. And you realize this whole town Ernest was in, no wonder he left. Everyone in this town is kind of a jerk.
And another thing, they went to the trope of the parents don't approve.
Yeah, and it's Ernest's
doesn't
parents.
approve of him more than anything else, and their relationship is strained.
And it's like, what?
It's pretty bad. And it's like, what the heck is this doing
Yeah,
in here?
yeah, that's
This
a thing in here now.
It really didn't work for this movie.
No,
It just didn't work.
Yeah, you're right. And the standard, the thing here is that when he comes back, he didn't want to come back, and you see why. In this town, the female bears become nurses. The male bears become judges. There is no if, ands, or buts. You can't swap jobs. You can't change to another thing. You must become one of those 2 things, or you are banished from this town. And the rules of this thing make no sense because it immediately puts Ernest in a situation where, well, you're going to do what I say because you're back home and you're not going to leave and do what you want to do. Why is this tone in this movie?
True. Now, I want to say, we've never read the original book. If this is canon to the book, then it's not the writer's fault.
Right.
But if it's not canon to the book, and this is the plot line they came up with, shame on you. This just doesn't make any sense. It's, as you mentioned, a far stretch. It's not likable.
Yeah.
The characters aren't likable. All the magic of Ernest and Celestine is just gone. It's not in here. And the ending totally sucks.
Unfortunately, yes. It just sort of ends. I mean, it has that happy ending where, of course, the rule's done away with, which is great.
Yeah.
But that feeling you got at the end that was satisfying for the first one of, these two people that were bickering for no reason were keeping these two apart, and it's like all they want should just be friends and be together. That's it. And they try to do the same thing in here. Like, look, they just want to play music. They even have a whole group of underground musicians.
It once in the first movie. We
Yeah,
don't need to see that
it's
again.
like,
Develop more on the friendship.
Exactly.
Give us something more. We were looking for joy. We got none.
Yeah, and they have this whole group of underground musicians that play in secret because they can't play in the outside world. It's like, what is this?
So we want to give a shout out to the English dub cast quickly because we got a couple favorites. Andrew Kishino was the voice of Ernest. No Forrest Whitaker. They didn't want to pay to bring him back. Ashley Boddicker is Celestine. I'm sure the young lady who voiced her in the first movie was probably too old. That's understandable.
Right.
We have David Lodge from the original Bleach.
Yes.
Kim Pachi voicing Nabokov. And Yako Novara voicing Camellia. Lena Josephine Morano, Bill Lobley, and Daniel Hagen round out the English dub cast.
Yes.
So they did have a good cast.
Right. But
we still didn't understand why on earth would you not bring back Forrest Whitaker?
Yeah.
Why would you not bring it the way the performance was for this character? The way he chose to speak and the timing and the pentameter and everything just worked. And the person that they brought in, I think, decided to approach it from a totally different angle.
Yeah.
And that made Ernest not the same.
Right. And I think there's only two things we liked about this movie. One, it stayed the same animation as the first film. You can tell it was very slightly updated with the colors, but it stayed the same style as the first movie. It was like literally like a watercolor storybook in the background and designs. That they kept. The second thing was, one thing they never used again was when they had one of the characters that was supposed to be in disguise and playing music and running from the police. There's no music in this town, and so much so there's even no soundtrack for when they're in this whole place, so I actually made it cheaper, is that when the person's trying to run away, they play their own getaway music and literally play the soundtrack as they're running away and getting the best of them and jumping from place to place. They're making their own music and sound effects, which I thought was actually creative, but they didn't use it again in the rest of the movie when that was actually a fun idea to bring in the soundtrack being played by the characters.
Very true. So if you've seen Ernest and Celestine 2, let us know in the comments. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Tell us what you think. And if you haven't, this is another one of those movies we say pass. If you've never seen either movie, watch the first one. It is so worth the investment.
And the TV show.
Love it. Yes. Invest your time in those. Pass on the second movie. It just doesn't do it.
Right. And if you don't know, already subscribe for updates that we do videos for your anime series, anime shows, and all things animation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing our videos, subscribing, commenting, and so much more. We really appreciate you guys. And as always,
you are special. Thank you so much for watching Mask Entertainment.
And I'm Mom Entertainment.
Have a fantastic day.
Peace.